you want to work out with your hormones. You don't want to destroy your body when you don't have the things necessary to replete it. Like, for example, during your menses, your hormones they're plummeted. You don't have testosterone really being produced either. So if you're just destroying yourself during your period, you do not have the hormones to recover. All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Doc Jacque Show. We got 30 plus of these episodes under our belt, and I could have and I should have maybe talked about this prior to getting this far into the podcast process, but we're here, it's happening, we're diving into it, and I think maybe this is the perfect time to do it, and I'm holding you on there with the cliffhanger, like, what's he going to talk about? What's he going to talk about? Well, if you saw the title of this, you're probably already going to know, but this is going to be how to work out based off your menstrual cycle. Okay. So guys, if you're out there and you don't have a menstrual cycle, I would still say, listen to this because you may be able to help your wife or your girlfriend in this process. Now, this isn't something for, every single woman has to do it this way, but it can definitely help with period regulation if you're dealing with PMS, PMDD. These types of swaps and things like that can make you fully understand, what's actually going on. So before we dive into the nitty gritty of like, what can I do? Can I do my high intensity interval training right now or not? We're going to map out what the cycle actually looks like. Now, when we go over these numbers, we're going to go over these numbers as if everyone has a perfect 28-day cycle. Now, this isn't saying, hey, if you got a 30-day cycle, you're dying or anything, but we're going to do that just for simplicity's sake, just because it's easy to break down the numbers that way. That's kind of what we're going to be going into. The only thing that's really going to change is when your ovulation would be technically set to occur would be, if you're at 28 days, ovulation is supposed to be at 14. So if you go up a couple more days, you just basically split the days in half of what your full menstrual cycle length would be. That's when we're going to be talking about ovulation, switching from follicular to then the luteal phase, right? So let's get into that. So menstruation, the menstrual cycle, the actual start of your menstrual cycle is day one of bleeding here. Usually in that process, we've got about 5 to 7 days worth of transition, if you will. In the phase that we're in here, in the menses, what obviously is happening is we're shedding that lining. It's coming out. I'm not going to go graphic in details again. If there's guys listening, like, oh my God, don't worry. We're not going that deep, but we're shedding that stuff off. And yes, blood is going to come out. In this particular period or time frame, there are certain macronutrients, micronutrients, and things that you should be taking in. Just from a logical standpoint, if you're losing blood, okay, iron comes in with a heme molecule. So iron, hemoglobin, you're losing that. You should eat iron-rich foods. If you listen intuitively to your body, a lot of times people will start craving like your red meats, things like that around this time frame, or other foods that are high in iron. And you might be like, man, I'm a vegan and I never want to eat meat, but every time I have my menstruation, I want to go have a steak. It's your body telling you, hey, listen, we're running out of iron here. You need to make sure you restore it, replete it, so that way we can keep this thing moving. We can keep this ball rolling. Now, obviously, if we have heavier flows than others, puts you at a higher risk for developing anemia during that phase of the cycle, but it's something to definitely remember. In terms of exercise during this particular phase of your cycle, right? There are varying opinions on what you should do. There are some health gurus that are out there like, go do heavy compound movements, work out, use your strength, get in there and move. If you feel that you are capable of doing that, then great. That's awesome. However, don't do any of the high intensity interval trainings, the CrossFit workouts, the workouts that require finesse, barefoot training, if you're trying to, work on a one-legged Bosu ball, squat, don't do that around this time frame. Okay, the reason is because you're going to be far less coordinated during your menses. So don't get hurt. You'd be more injury prone. The other thing is you're having a pretty intense stress take place in your body. You are shedding that lining, right? You are dropping your iron down a little bit, right? Maybe you should take it easy with your body. Do some low intensity stuff. Do some Pilates. Take a week off if you want to. Go for a walk. Go do some yoga. Do something more light, inward reflection, being grateful of even having a menstrual cycle, even though some people are like, oh man, I hate this thing. Well, at least you have one. I work with 20-year-olds, teenagers who can't get their cycle because of different complications that are taking place. Be grateful that you have and your body has the ability to run through that cycle. Okay. So remembering food sources that you're going to want, you're going to need during that time frame are going to be different compared to as we move through the cycle here. So the other thing, while we're talking about the menstrual cycle, I wanted to make sure I pulled up my notes to dive into this. Usually during your period, when you're going through your menstrual cycle, you feel this natural call to kind of reflect and turn inward, which is a good thing. There's also an increase in delta brainwave activity. And you guys know that I love my binaural beats. So I have it in my app right here on my computer, but if you listen to the delta waves, it can kind of push you into more of a rest and relaxation state. Okay. It increases our desire for rejuvenation and allows us to basically turn inward and store up that energy for the rest of your cycle. Foods, again, to make sure we're getting in is definitely going to be the red meats or the food that has a higher iron concentration, which again, red meat is going to be your staple. Now, with red meat though, don't use this as an excuse because you can go to Aldi and get grass-fed beef. So no excuses, and it's not that much more expensive anymore, guys. Go for grass-fed meat. Don't go for conventionally raised. That stuff is terrible. It's terrible for you, terrible for the environment, terrible for all parties involved. Because one of the other things that you can supplement in during this time of your cycle is going to be your omega oils, your healthy fats as well. And when you eat those healthy steaks or that healthy beef, you're going to have that perfect balance between the omega-6 and omega-3s. Otherwise, if we have too much inflammatory fat, then we're not going to have that balance that comes back out. Okay. So make sure you're going Whole Foods. You don't have to go to Whole Foods, but you're going to eat Whole Foods, go for the grass-fed. If you think it costs too much, find an Aldi, you'll find one, or Costco. You can find like 15 packs of beef for like $10. I don't know. It's been a while since I've been to Costco, but that is the information for this portion of the cycle. Okay. Now in this, as we're going into your next phase. Okay. So we'll just say days 1 through 5 or 1 through 7. So the first week, okay, of your cycle is going to be more inward reflection, increase red meats, healthy omega-3s, inward reflect, store energy, try to do exercise like yoga, Pilates, something that's just really passive, not too difficult, and you don't want to do any explosive movements or plyometric movements, high intensity movements in this particular phase. Again, you'll just be a little bit more clumsy, and you may actually notice that if you try to do these workouts. You're like, man, I was awesome in it last week, and now my menses came and like my period came, and now I can't do anything. I can't even walk up the stairs without falling over. It's a common thing to have happen during that phase of the cycle. So don't take it to heart if you're a little bit more clumsy, or even if you're not able to hit the same max rep weight that you did, 2 weeks prior on the time of your period. Okay. Because things are going to fluctuate. Things are going to drop down for you. As we go through, we now switch from your period in week 1, and then we go into your follicular phase. Okay. Follicular phase is basically going to be like day 7 to about day 14. Again, we're tracking this based off of a 28-day cycle. Okay. So your follicular phase is basically going to meet up into your ovulation. Ovulation is halfway between start and end of your cycle. Okay. So again, 28 days, looking for day 14. So in your follicular phase, you will notice that you're able to do a lot more, okay? A lot stronger. You can have growth hormone that's being released. This would be a time where you're slowly starting to ramp up the intensity of your exercise, okay? So as you ramp up the intensity, what's going to happen is you're going to be stronger. You can hit your PRs a little bit more as well, and your body's really going to thank you for it, okay? So again, looking from days 7 to 14, all right? This is, and then in terms of, so this is another thing that's important too. Sorry, I forgot to mention this one. Your carb intake, right? So a lot of women will talk about carb cycling. Dietitians will talk about avoidance of carbs. I'll talk about avoidance of carbs as well. Usually it's in terms of, eat the good stuff. Carbs aren't all bad. It just depends on what the carb source is. Ice cream, terrible. A bag of steam fresh vegetables, that's good carbs. So know that they are not created equally just because they have the carbohydrate label. In basically like the first half of your cycle, all right, up to day 14, up to ovulation more or less, you can keep your carbohydrates about the same, okay? You don't have to worry about dropping them all that much. And again, this is barring you having any sort of infection that's taking place in the gut that would feed off of this, because usually with the infections, we're going to take about 2 months of carb depletion, overcome that infection, and then add those back into your diet for you. The reason that we do it on the first half is because your body does a better job with regulating your blood sugar. In the second half of the cycle, we can have a tendency, due to the hormone fluctuations, we can have a tendency to have a difficult time with carbohydrate management. Either we raise our insulin and we become insulin resistant, which means we require a lot more insulin to handle 1 molecule of glucose, or we just have a really hard time. Pancreas isn't working 100%, and it's just one thing after another. Okay. So when we're talking about the cycle, you can keep your carbs about the same first 2 weeks of your cycle. Second 2 weeks of your cycle, start working on depleting your carbs a little bit more, but increasing healthy fats. It's really important. Okay. Healthy fats are going to help you to replace the carbohydrates that you were taking before. Fats don't make you fat. Bad fats make you fat. Okay. Just same thing with carbs. Carbs don't make you fat. Bad carbs make you fat. So I might get into some battles with some people, but it's pretty much common sense on that. Okay. So going into what type of exercise to do in that follicular phase, remembering as we're getting into that, our estrogen is starting to go up, our progesterone is starting to go up, and then we're going to have this estrogen spike, okay? And then it's going to boom, drop and plummet come ovulation, and then progesterone. I'm doing stuff with my hands. I don't know if you're watching this, you can see, but estrogen is going to drop, and then progesterone is going to do like a trend line swoop upward after the estrogen spike. That's why when we do the cycle map, okay, the Dutch cycle map, we're able to see what your hormones are doing and when your spike is actually taking place. So ovulation, again, is supposed to be halfway between, start and end of the cycle. So when estrogen goes up, you can also have issues with bloating, more emotional at that period of time. So right before ovulation, you can hold on to a little excess water weight because estrogen can make you do that. Usually it's around the belly button, thighs. Okay, so you can have that hormonal fluctuation and boom, estrogen's supposed to drop. Progesterone compensates, comes back up, and it starts to regulate out the estrogen as we cruise along past the ovulation and we cruise into the luteal phase. Luteal phase is going to be basically day 15, more or less, to day 28. All right, so it's like 2 weeks worth of your cycle. In that time, we're switching from like your okay carbs, high to moderate carbs, to now, boom, we're trying to plummet it down a little bit more. Okay. And I have a ratio here for you too. I was doing a little bit of extra work here for y'all. If you reduce your carbs by 10 grams, increase your fat by 4 grams. Okay. So carbs, say you're doing 200 grams of carbs a day, which is a lot, 200 grams of carbs, and you drop it down to 190, well, then increase your fat intake by 4 grams. Okay, so think of different foods and things, whole foods that you can eat to get that in. Again, super easy ways to do it is things like coconut oil. You can get it through avocados, healthy fish, and healthy beef as well. So if you continue to drop it down past 10 grams, obviously we can do intervals of 10 and then multiply by 4. However many 10 gram increments you drop, just increase by the same times 4. Okay. So that can help you out quite a bit. Now, in that luteal phase here, we want to focus on, again, reducing the carbs, but increasing your good proteins and increasing your good fats. This is usually the time frame where women are like, I am craving chocolate. I want chocolate so bad. And if you're eating the good stuff, that's okay. If you're eating your organic, your dark chocolates, things like that, the more bitter, the better, and slap an organic label on that chocolate's going to be good. There's a brand, HU. I don't know how to pronounce it, Hue. I'm just going to slaughter it, but that's a decent chocolate brand there too. There's a bunch that are out there, but make sure you're going after just dark chocolate, not milk chocolate or anything else with any type of like bad oils or anything else really added into it. Chocolate's going to have a lot of really good compounds whenever it comes to your hormones. It's going to give you some magnesium, theobromine. It's going to give you a lot of stuff. And it also can help you with your cravings. And I'd rather you eat a chocolate bar than go and eat a Ben & Jerry's pint of ice cream. So moving into what type of exercise do we do? Okay. Just as we're talking about, the menstrual cycle being down low and then hormones starting to fluctuate up, estrogen going up, progesterone slightly going, estrogen drops, progesterone goes back up. And then from that point on, from like day 1 to day 28, you're doing like kind of a bell curve in terms of exercise or intensity of exercise. During your menstrual cycle, you're low. Going into the follicular phase, you're basically trying your best here, getting those levels up. And then that mid-luteal phase where we switch over, go from ovulation mid-luteal, that's when you're really going to be able to crush your workouts. Okay. You're going to be able to get the most bang for your buck. You're going to put some really nice lean muscle mass on if you try hard enough. Women, lifting heavy weights is not going to make you gain, but the weight is not going to make you gain muscle. There's only 2 complications that can happen, and you need to get your hormones tested. Number 1, if you're over converting to DHT, making you 8 times more anabolic than testosterone, and you just put on muscle mass really easily, that is a hormonal complication. It needs to be fixed. Usually it's blood sugar related or adrenal related. And the other thing is then going into the adrenals. If your adrenals are completely tapped down and you're in a phase 3 and you can't exercise at all, these are for people who have relatively normal adrenal readings. Okay. If you wake up in the morning, I guess this is a good disclaimer here, a little tangent here. If you wake up in the morning and you're like, man, I'm beat. I am so exhausted. I can't move. I can't function. I can't think. And then you're like, I should go work out. That's a really dumb thing to do. It's a really dumb choice. And I know there's probably a lot of weight gurus and bodybuilders and all these people out there who are like, what are you talking about? Push through it. No, your body's smarter than you. Your subconscious is way smarter than your freaking brain. If you are zapped, if you are exhausted, do not work out. Okay? Don't do it. There's something to do as well with your heart rate variability. If you have things like the Oura Ring, or if you've got the Whoop, you'll be able to track your readiness. And I've tracked it for probably the past 3 years or so. And on the days where I'm like, oh my God, I'm so exhausted. I can't get up. I can't get moving, because it happens to me, guys. I'm not perfect over here. There are days I'm exhausted. I've got 2 kids, for goodness sakes. So when you wake up, and I'll track it, my heart rate variability will be dropped down. All right, I've got a scientific measurement of it. And yeah, there can be some inaccuracies to the readings, and one might be better than the other. But for the most part, like, you're going to get a pretty good representation as to whether or not you should work out. If you're down in the, hey, take a rest, you'll feel it. If you're up in the, hey, you're ready to crush the day, you'll feel that too. So listen to your body. I am not telling you to go against your will and say, well, you can lick your wounds during your period, but as soon as your follicular phase hits, you better get your ass up off the ground and start working out. It's not what I'm saying at all. If your adrenals are tanked, slow movements are key until you're able to regulate your hormones. Otherwise, you are going to be doing your body more harm than good. Because remember, we talked about it in a previous podcast here, your HPA axis is going to have an influence on your HPT axis, your thyroid. It's also going to have an influence on your HPG axis. So if we're stimulating, luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone to release our sex hormones in the body, but then we get stressed out and then it cancels that readout and it cancels that signal, you will no longer be producing the luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and then your sex hormones will drop, and then you'll be abnormal, which is also why it's important to make sure that as you're pushing into this phase and we're getting into the end phase of the luteal phase, you want to start backing off of the intensity. Okay. And again, this is why everyone loves their CrossFit. I think everyone still, I don't even know. But CrossFit's about just killing yourself all day, every day. And don't get me wrong, I do CrossFit workouts every once in a while. I have a WOD Bible in the garage for my workouts, but I'll use that predominantly for cardio because the high intensity is good. It's great for weight loss. It's great for hormone release, growth hormone release. It's good. I love it. But there's a time and a place for it. If you're doing it all day, every day, all month long, your body's going to fall apart. And it's usually going to fall apart after about 3 months or so, which is where your hormones are really starting to be influenced by what you're doing. If we're causing too much stress on our body, then we're going to have longer cycles because our progesterone's not going to be doing what it's supposed to, okay? You're not going to have those normal fluctuations. You will have that cortisol steal that takes place because you're constantly creating cortisol, constantly creating inflammation in the body, and your body can't keep up. I digressed a lot there, but I think it's really important to know and to note in there because this is for people, again, disclaimer, this is for people who they wake up in the morning, they have energy and they're good to go. If you're like, man, I've never had my adrenals tested, well, contact me. We'll get your adrenals tested, not a big deal. Or you can just assess yourself too. If you wake up and you feel good and you go and you work out and you don't slay the workout, you don't just like do it until your arms fall off, but you take like a full week or 2 weeks or consistently like 2 weeks a week to recover, your body is probably still staying in that catabolic phase. So these workouts would not be right for you. You'd want to do, again, the low intensity, just do the bare minimum, get your body moving. I've had women who are like, man, I'm trying to lose weight. I'm trying to do calorie restriction. I'm doing 2-hour workout and 2 hours of cardio and I can't lose weight. I'm like, stop working out. And within like 2 weeks, they're like, I'm down 10 pounds. I'm like, yeah, no shit. Your body was able to recover. All you were doing was creating inflammation in your body, and your body was trying to figure out what to do with it. You were catabolic. You were never anabolic. So swapping that over can be really, really, really huge, or can be a really huge impact on your health and on your hormones. So again, going back into this, digression aside, you want to focus in the luteal phase from day 14 or so, or 15 to 28. You want to try to make sure that you're maximizing your workouts, reducing the carbs, increasing fats, focus on some metabolic conditioning as well. You could do weight intervals, you can do rowing bike. This is like your CrossFit window where you want to try to do this stuff, okay? Versus like the first half is more like the hypertrophy, the bodybuilding movements. Second half is going to be more like the ballistic movements, okay? So going through your cycle, making sure everything is good and happy and healthy is going to be huge. It's going to be crucial, okay? Now, during the luteal phase as well, things that you should be eating, okay, because we talked about nutrition for the follicular phase. Actually, we talked about it for the menstrual phase or the period. So we could talk about it for the follicular as well. So the follicular phase, basically what you're going to be doing is going after the protein and the veggies, just like normal. Helps to keep your estrogens balanced out as well. And then go for your proteins being like your pasture-raised eggs, wild-caught fish can be big, sweet potatoes, leafy greens. It has a good concentration of vitamin E in it, which is really good for nourishing the follicles that are being stimulated by follicle stimulating hormone. Exercise-wise, in the follicular phase, you've got testosterone and the estrogen coming on the rise, which is where I was saying you could do like the heavy workouts, things like that, to be a little bit more anabolic through this phase. So that's fun. Then you get into the luteal phase. What to eat during the luteal phase, going more towards like your root veggies, more grounding stuff, sweet potatoes, yams. You can do like the berries, so like foraging type food, blackberries, raspberries, strawberries, blueberries, things with vitamin C in it. The combination of those things can help to support proper progesterone levels. And it also helps with buffering. That fiber helps to buffer out any excess estrogen that needs buffered out after that drop going into ovulation, going into the luteal phase, okay? Exercising again. So you're in the menstrual cycle, you're in your period, you peaked up in the follicular, and then you start to kind of taper back down as we're going into the luteal phase, into the next cycle or the next period. So exercise, you want to keep moving. do what you can. I mean, sometimes people have a lot of high energy. Sometimes you can have energetic dips in here as well. If you killed yourself basically in your follicular phase, luteal phase, use it to kind of like rehab after as well. You can still do heavy movements, but make sure that you are spending time with recovery and you don't want to push it. I would say do that up to like week 3. All right. So week 1 period, week 2, going into ovulation there. So follicular, that's your peak workout wise. Then you have ovulation, then you have your luteal phase, and basically week 3 and 4. So week 3, crush it. Week 4, start taking your foot off the throttle a little bit more. Okay, so again, visualization wise, you want to see kind of what's known as a bell curve, where you're flat, you slowly start to increase, and it makes like this bubble. Then it drops and comes back down for your next menses. Okay, that's going to be key with all of this stuff. Okay, and again, from a nutrient standpoint, remember if you're dropping 10 grams of carbs, increase 4 grams of fat to compensate for the caloric loss on that, so that your body has something else to burn. It's something that people struggle with quite a bit. But I think the biggest thing in this is a little bit shorter of one. It's a little bit headier one, maybe a boring one. I don't know, but I think it's I think it's important for people out there. But this is, let's just freestyle here, because I had a bunch of notes here. I'm just going to freestyle. So there's actually studies. There was, I forget what team it was. I think one of the teams in the Olympics were basically like, hey, we all competed during the wrong phase in our cycle. And so that's our excuse as to for our poor performance. And again, if you're doing something like a gymnastics routine and you have your period, you're an Olympic level athlete. That's great. But you're going to be at a very high risk for injury if you're flying around and trying to land and stick the landings and all of that. It's going to be really dangerous for you. So there is some merit to it. There is some truth behind it. But for the average everyday person that's out there, this is really important stuff. You want to work out with your hormones. You don't want to destroy your body when you don't have the things necessary to replete it. Like, for example, during your menses, your hormones they're plummeted. You don't have testosterone really being produced either, right? So you need testosterone for protein biosynthesis to be able to rebuild any type of cartilaginous tissue, to rebuild any type of muscle tissue. So if you're just destroying yourself during your period, you do not have the hormones to recover. So you're already starting, football terms, with one foot in the bucket. You step back before you step forward. So you have more ground to make up instead of just initially, boom, running out of the gates. Right? And that's why in track, you'll have the starting blocks. So there's no way you can take a step back. You have to launch forward. So when those hormones go down, respect your body in those instances. Also, guys, don't expect your woman on her period to be hypersexual. It's not going to happen. It's closed down, closed for repairs. Don't try, and then don't be upset if your wife isn't a nymphomaniac around her period. Hormonally speaking, she will not be, and you will piss her off if you do try. So respect the cycle. Again, as we start to go from the period and you go into the follicular phase and you start to peak up into the ovulation, you start increasing some of those things so the sex drive can start to awaken a little bit more. Your fertility window is basically 3 days. It can be up to like 5 days prior to ovulation. So that follicular phase, you could be pretty sexually active, pretty okay. Things are good in that realm. And even post-ovulation, you can have a little bit more in that sex drive. But what I'm also saying is you're having an increase in that testosterone. You're having an increase in progesterone and estrogen, an increase in those feel-good hormones. And so you want to be touched. You want to be more active. You want to be able to get into the gym and slay your workouts because you have the hormones now to then replete or repair anything you break down and damage. And then again, as you're tapering down, what's really important to note is for the menstrual cycle, stress, again, HPA axis to the HPG axis here. If you're stressing yourself out during your workouts, okay, and that just means if you're working out and you're doing something where it's a little bit more explosive, your heart rate is all over the place. Again, the Tabata, the high intensity interval training. If you're doing that on a consistent basis, you will throw off your hormones. You will throw off your cycle. And you'll be like, oh my gosh, I was getting a 28-day cycle. Now I'm at 35. What happened? What the hell were you doing? Could be food related. what were you doing with exercise? Were you killing your body? Were you not giving yourself a chance to rest? Did you switch into a CrossFit workout and you just did that for an entire month and your body's like, I can't even process right now? There's a lot of factors that go into this. So another disclaimer on this. Again, this isn't for everyone. If you're like, man, my cycle is 28 days. I have no PMS symptoms. I think I got my things down. I'm working out. I'm doing pretty good. Everything's A-okay. Then don't worry about changing so much. I would say from a nutritional standpoint, still do those things that I said during your period, eat more iron-rich foods, then like slowly you'll have the higher carbs in the first half of the cycle, then start to taper those down, do a little bit of carb cycling, more or less going into the luteal phase into the next period. But when it comes to your workouts, you don't have to completely overhaul just because you heard this. If your cycle is irregular and you're like, I don't know, maybe this could help, then this is free information for you to give it a shot and try it. There's plenty of resources all through the internet, which is why I wanted to try to condense this down as best I could to be able to allow you to know, like, hey, during your cycle, this is what you can be doing, this is what you should be doing, and this is how it should be presented. In fact, maybe I'll try to have my team do like a little graphic of this and I'll share it. So that way it'll be easier instead of having to listen to, a 30-minute podcast or however long this went. So again, hopefully this helped some people there today. Again, it's a different way to look at your hormones, different way to look at exercise. But if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me on this topic. And hopefully this served you well here today. But thank you again for tuning in. Be sure to leave a review, 5 stars, write a review in there, and we'll chat next time.